Good afternoon, everyone. It's 5 o'clock on Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. I'd like to call to order the Administration Committee meeting. Before we do roll call, I will mention that Supervisor Peavy is excused despite vaccinations and boosters. He seems to have come down with a case of the vid, as I like to call it. So he won't be joining us tonight, which is probably a really good thing. Let's do roll call.
Supervisor Long.
Present.
Supervisor Cook.
Present.
Supervisor Ard.
Present.
Supervisor Peterson.
Here.
And Supervisor Peavy is excused. We have a quorum.
Any comments or edits or changes on the minutes from our Tuesday, October 19th meeting? Hearing none, the minutes will stand as published. Public comment. Anyone from the public like to comment at this time? Last call, public comment. I don't see anyone, so we'll move on to our business items, and we'll start off with our financial report for October. Ken?
Yeah, overall the financials are looking, right on target with where we'd expect them this year. There's nothing out of the norm that needs to be highlighted. If you look at our vehicle registration fees, they're right on target, and sales tax is trending above target as it has been all year. And then KIP projects, we're starting to get a lot of those closed out as we're nearing the end of the year. And that's the highlights of the financial report. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you have, though.
Any questions just real quickly, now that we're getting close to the end of the year, is there anything that you're anticipating might be unusual as we wrap up the year, or any concerns at this point in time?
No, it's going to be just the same as it is every year.
I didn't think so. I'm just asking the question. Okay, we'll move on to item number 2, resolution approving the labor agreement between St. Croix County Local 453 of the Wisconsin Professional Police Association Law Enforcement Employee Relations Division for 2022 through 2024.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be presenting the highlights of the proposed agreement. I guess I can do it two ways. I can go page by page, change by change, or I have kind of a 7 or 8 bullet point of the major changes, so I think I would prefer to do that unless someone wants to go page by page.
Bullet points are great.
Okay, so number 1, this agreement is a 3-year agreement that provides for an across-the-board wage increase to the wage schedule, so each step is going to be increased by 6% in 2022, 1% in 2023, and 1% in 2024, except for a separate classification that's been created in the labor contract for court service deputies. They will receive, rather than a 6% increase in 2022, a 1% increase. And so that classification is between correctional deputy 2 and primary services deputy. So corrections is at level 2, primary services deputy is at level 4, and court services deputy is at newly created level 3. So in looking at this contract and from a financial perspective, it has a really kind of a large footprint or cost increase in the first year and relatively low cost increase in years 2 and 3. And I should point out that in the first year, ARPA dollars are going to be primarily or all funding the 6% increase. Now that's going to create, as Ken has suggested or has told people, that creates what's called a structural deficit, and that's something that the board is going to have to deal with in 2023. But as a cushion to that deficit, there's only a 1% increase in the next 2 years. One of the things that we were looking at in the bargaining table, which is a rather kind of unique circumstance in which the county compared very favorably to what is deemed our comparables under Wisconsin law. But the problem being is that local municipalities, Hudson, River Falls, and New Richmond, are outpacing our wage scale. So we felt that it was appropriate to increase kind of like positions so that they remain competitive with River Falls and Hudson and New Richmond, and then create a separate category for court security deputies, which is a separate kind of like duty, but the comparables in the municipalities don't have comparables for those types of positions, but in terms of the counties, we sit very well with. So that's kind of the thinking behind the 6% increase and the classification difference. The other thing, one other thing that's going on with the wage grid is that it extends the wage grid 2 additional steps, one at year 8 and one at year 10. So there are going to be some deputies receiving a greater increase as a result of that, and that will continue to make the county's deputies competitive with the local municipalities in this kind of anomaly by the river in terms of, we don't want to lose our good people. In addition, we're agreeing to place people when they're promoted to a higher classification on the wage grid at the corresponding years of service. We've kind of had a mixed practice of placing people at the step that gives them an increase, and then with other employees we've been placing people at giving them credit for the years of service in their prior position. This will be uniform in awarding employees the placement of the commensurate years of experience in the promoted classification. Example, if someone was at step 5 as a correctional officer 2, and if they were promoted to primary services deputy, they would go to that step 5 in that different classification. I think it's a strategy to remain competitive and to remain equitable within the bargaining unit. The other big thing that this contract does is it moves the schedule away from either a 9.5 hour shift for primary services deputies or an 8.5 hour shift for correctional to a 12-hour shift for each classification. This makes scheduling much easier. There are obviously pros and cons to a 12-hour shift. The pro is that the employee gets more days off. They're working fewer days, but they're working longer days. It makes it easier to schedule because everything is scheduled within a 2-week increment rather than the overlapping scenarios that are created by 9.5 and 8.5 hour shifts. And lastly, this agreement eliminates equalized pay from the bargaining agreement, meaning that in past and in the current agreement, those officers who work 8.5 and 9.5 hour shifts may have worked less or more than the number of scheduled hours, normally scheduled hours, so there was a bank So at the end of the year, that there was either a payout or a grab from reduction in pay, that no longer exists. Ken, being a finance man, he likes that, and that was a goal achieved for him. So those are really the primary differences in this contract, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
I'll make a quick comment. I like the fact that you mentioned the strategies to remain competitive. I think that's really important, even though we've kind of got it loaded up front,
Right.
which is really good. And I've asked this question before, but I'll ask it again just for the benefit of the committee. Have you gotten a level of satisfaction from our sheriff's office on the agreement?
The union has ratified it.
Yeah,
And the sheriff is happy with the 12-hour shifts.
great. Another question, would it be possible to include, depending upon if you're comfortable with this, your bullet point explanations in the board packet? Sure. I think that would be really helpful for the board to get that level of explanation prior to the meeting.
I'd be happy to do that, and I'll polish them up a little bit.
Great.
Worked on them this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Corporation Counsel? Okay, we have a resolution. Looks like we need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the resolution approving the labor agreement between St. Croix County and Local 453.
I'll second.
And second, any further discussion? Okay, given none, we're ready to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Scott.
What?
Need any help writing that out?
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to number 3, resolution amending personnel policies, procedures handbook.
Good evening. So we have 4 policies today. One of them is a revision, one is a new one, and then 2 are ones we're recommending be deleted because they're covered elsewhere. So I'll start with 6.9, performance evaluations. This was the revised policy, replacing Article 15 in our current handbook. The primary changes were formatting, adding a definition, change the timeline to periodic to allow flexibility to update the expectations as dictated by best practice or organizational needs versus actually stating what time frame each year they had to be done. And then we added some guidelines. If no questions on that one, I'll move on to outside employment. This one did have the most discussion with this batch of policies. This is a new policy. And we do have one recommended. There was some feedback that continued to come in after we'd actually submitted the packet for the admin committee. And what that resulted in is us recommending that what you currently have in your packet, that we would add a section at the very end of that policy that would be numbered 6.18.6 and titled volunteering. There was concern expressed that this was going to limit people's ability to volunteer and or require them to have to disclose everything they're volunteering for to their supervisor. And so we were recommending adding volunteering and then a statement under that section that reads, employees shall disclose volunteer activities to their supervisor if they think the volunteer work may create a conflict of interest. And this was accepted or approved by staff advisory as this satisfying their concerns. But for that to happen, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but this would require a motion for an amendment to the policy tonight for us to go ahead and take that forward to county board.
They can adopt it as suggested to be amended, so.
Okay. So that was the outside employment. That was the primary discussion that was around that policy, was just not wanting to limit people's volunteer opportunities and/or require them to have to report everything they're doing for volunteering. And then for Article 9, Section 1, that was titled The First Day in our current handbook, recommendation is to delete that. This is best addressed in an onboarding guide, which HR is working on. So instead of having that in the handbook, it would be an onboarding guide that we would disseminate across to employees, supervisors, and employees. And then lastly, Article 19, Section 15, exposure to bloodborne pathogens and other potentially infectious materials. This is another one we recommend be deleted. This one is currently a detailed procedure in our SCC safety manual. And again, when we look at our other counties or municipalities, when we're comparing our policies, no other counties that we evaluated actually have that in their handbook. So we're recommending deleting that. Are there any questions?
I do have one quick question for you. Going back to the performance evaluations,
Yes.
do we have any type of a policy that, how do I say this, basically says that the performance evaluation should be a kind of a summary of feedback that's already been provided? In other words, there wouldn't be any surprises for an employee when they get their performance evaluation because they've already heard that type of feedback?
Absolutely. I don't believe that's actually included in the specific policy, but that is what we train them on, and it is documented elsewhere, like on our performance evaluation intranet page, that, continuing to educate managers that employees should never hear about a concern for the first time in the actual performance review. So that is outlined otherwise. I don't think that specific part is in the policy, but we do have it on our intranet site.
Other questions? Okay, I guess we're ready for a motion on the resolution. Supervisor Ard?
I would move to approve the resolution amending the personnel policies and procedures and adding section 6.18.6 volunteering to this language.
And second? Supervisor Cook? Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we're ready to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Tara. Okay, let's move on to number 4. Consideration of position reclassifications in Facilities and Finance Department.
So that's me again. So we do have 2 reclassification requests. They are both involving currently vacant positions. The first one will be for the vacant facilities manager to a facilities project manager. This reclassification does decrease the pay grade primarily because the facilities project manager will not be a direct supervisor, so that did downgrade the position. This change is being requested because there's a need for more focused scope of work for the county in the areas where we're seeing a lot more construction projects. And it was determined by the facilities director that having an expert in this area would be more efficient and cost effective. And I know that the facilities director, Jim, is here if anyone had additional questions for him about that. Then the other reclassification is a vacant accounting supervisor in our finance department, and the request is to reclassify that to an assistant finance director. This one does result in a pay grade increase from 65 to 69. This request is being made for a more advanced position at the government center that can assist the finance director with fiscal affairs, fiscal matters that relate primarily to the work being done with the government center, and then also to have some succession planning and have a backup for the finance director. Both the county administrator and the human resource director do recommend these reclassifications. And of course, Leah is here to speak to her position as well.
Questions? Pretty quiet group. Okay, well, hearing no questions, I guess we'll entertain a motion to approve the the resolution for reclassification.
So move.
Supervisor Peterson, and a second. I'll second. Any further discussion or questions regarding these reclassifications? Okay, well, I guess we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you also again, Tara. Okay, we'll move on to number 5. Consideration of disposition of 640 Main Street in Baldwin.
County clerk's not here tonight, so I'll introduce this topic. So we have this property that we've taken, 640 Main Street, Baldwin, for unpaid property taxes. Normally, what the process would be is we would get an appraisal on the property, we would open it up for sealed bids with that appraisal as the minimum amount, and then determine if we received any bids, we could award it to the high bidder, or you could reject all bids or whatever at that point. If we don't sell it at that stage, it opens it up for a little bit more creative way of disposing of the property. So where we're at with this one is we didn't want to spend the money to get an appraisal on it because we think we're already underwater on it. We have about $55,000 in expenses that we've already put into the property, and we've been told that it's really worth about $20,000, the value of the lot that the building is sitting on. So that created a little bit of a conundrum, so we thought we'd bring it to the committee, talk about it, see what direction you would like to go with it.
Ken, do we know exactly what is the condition of the building?
I have a series of photos. I can share those with you, bring them up on the screen so you can see what the condition is.
I mean, do we have, I looked the property up.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about foundation-wise, structurally,
Yeah.
plumbing, HVACA.
Yeah.
Is that where the issue lies? If it's a structural issue, then it's not,
Yeah, I'd probably
It-
defer to our facilities director. He's been through the building. Why don't you come on up, Jim?
I just got done touring the facility to take some recent pictures for you. So the foundation, there's issues with the foundation. It's the old rock and mortar foundation. The exterior is looking really bad. These are 9x9 tiles, so I'm assuming there's an issue with those as well. The inside of the structure, this is the foundation. It's a really old foundation. The other issues are the electrical, the HVAC, and the structure itself is questionable at best. It would take quite a bit to develop this. And it's gone through quite a few revisions since the original hotel that it was. It's a labyrinth of mess.
I have a thought, Mr. Chair. Or a question.
Supervisor Peterson.
It looks pretty bad, obviously. So what would happen if we maybe approached the fire department and if they wanted to use that for a training facility? Would that enable us to maybe at least get rid of the expense of that horrible building and then consider selling a lot? Otherwise, we're going to take I'm thinking a real beating on even the lot price, trying to get that.
So you're still going to have to do the asbestos abatement before you'd be able to burn it down, and that's really where a lot of the cost is. We were actually received a call today from someone that would be interested in purchasing it. So it was a former owner that had owned it a long time ago. He was familiar with the property. So he thinks he can rehabilitate it. I've seen worse.
I live in one.
So,
Just a couple of things. In terms of our costs, in raw county tax dollars, it's just a little bit over 25,000. And then the county interest and penalty is another almost 13,000. And then there are special charges which is owed to the Village of Baldwin. Those charges, including interest and penalty, total approximately $13,000. So when it comes to what the county would be out, and we'd be out eating the tax of 25,000 plus the interest and penalty, and then there's a few fees for share of cost in the foreclosure proceeding. So some of that cost, I'm trying to say, is that is really the village's cost, and they're going to have to eat. They were given an opportunity to look at the property and they declined. But
I guess I'm thinking if somebody's interested in maybe making an offer, maybe we should just set it aside or whatever for till the next meeting and see what we get for an offer. Would be my thought.
so what we would need to do is establish a minimum bid price and then open it up for a bidding with a bid deadline, and then we could have those at a future meeting. So not having an appraisal done, we need to establish what that minimum bid threshold is.
and the committee can establish the appraisal value.
Right.
Should
So
we
my
pick-
thoughts are, if there is an interested party in this, then if we cover the cost at 51,000, that makes the county whole on tax and penalty, and the Village of Baldwin whole on their expenses. And it gives someone a pretty darn good deal if they're looking to rehab the building. And I've seen worse that have come back to life. Because, as was pointed out, the asbestos abatement is costly.
Yeah, and then we've got the lead paint, and then this building has numerous computers just everywhere. So there's a lot of rubbish that has to be removed as
So,
well,
and-
and then specialized electronic
Right, my
recycling.
understanding is that this had previously been used as the Baldwin Youth Center, and it was not run in the best efficiency. But I would support taking the chance if we have an interested party.
Yeah, the value is really the big question, and 50,000, if we wanted to try to get all of our money back, 20,000 is probably more realistic to what the value is, because that's really what the lot is worth, and the amount of rehabilitation work in here is extensive. So, I don't know, 20 to 50, somewhere in that range, but
Does anyone know just offhand if this building qualifies under the historical register
It
due to the
does.
age of the building?
it does.
Because in that instance, if the proposed buyer were going to rehabilitate it, now he's opened up a whole plethora of funding in order to do that. For every dollar spent, he's going to receive those dollars back through state historical tax credit. And that would make this property very valuable,
And maybe we can put that in the ad, that it may
that it may qualify for,
qualify.
yes. And I think that would be a great idea, because that truly, if you're going to rehabilitate a building of this age and that has this history, and it's on the state register, then that would catch a lot of attention.
So Denise just handed me a note, as the clever county treasurer would. She's got the county loss or the county cost as $61.02, including money that the facilities department has expended in terms of preserving the property. And the rest of it, I believe, would be the Village of Baldwin. Oh, the rest of it would be county interest and penalty plus the Village of Baldwin special charges, interest and penalty.
I think my initial thought it'd be the $30,000 figure would be reasonable, but I'm open to other consideration there.
Well, I tell you, if we could get 30,000 for that property, I shouldn't say that, but I guess we ought to be pretty happy about that. And also happy if someone's actually willing to go in and spend the cost to either rehabilitate or tear it down and do something else there.
There's a lot of work to be done for sure.
Do you have any ballpark as to what it would actually take to either demolish or actually refurbish that building? Off the top of your head?
No, refurbish it would be just an unlimited amount of funding to get everything back into some kind of modern structure. It would all have to be dealt with the fire protection, so on and so forth. So for that part, I couldn't tell you. The demolition, we could get a cost, but there'd be a lot of, we'd probably be into $20,000 to $30,000 at minimum.
50 to 100,000 is
Well,
my
there you go.
estimate. I've seen demolitions hit 100,000 before.
Now, the asbestos abatement.
Asbestos would be 20,000 alone.
So when we're talking about the price here, though, we're talking about basically establishing the minimum bid, right? So
Yep.
I think 30,000 is reasonable, because if we're saying that's the minimum, and then we're talking about promoting the historical funding, we could get multiple parties up, yeah.
Should we take a shot at 30 then?
I'm good with it.
Sounds like that's a good starting point. Oh, we need a motion. Okay.
I would move to approve minimum bid starting at $30,000 with language stating that this structure may qualify for state historical grant funding for renovation and rehabilitation.
I'll second.
Supervisor Peterson seconds. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. All those in favor of establishing the minimum, of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Looks like we're good to go. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the last item on our business items, the resolution authorizing St. Croix County to enter into the settlement agreements. This was an interesting read. I guess you're on, Corporation Counsel.
Well, I'm sure you've all read it. Just, do you have any questions? No, I have a brief summary.
My question would be, have you actually read it?
I've skimmed I received them last Friday, and I've skimmed them, and I've got some talking points here. The most important point is that the county needs to act by January 2nd. And so the county can potentially receive up to $2.3 million in a settlement with the three major distributors of opioids and Johnson & Johnson. Now, keep in mind, there's still other defendants out there, other retailers, other manufacturers out there with potential settlements. So this distribution would pay a maximum of $21 billion over 18 years. So the settlement with the three distributors is over 18 years, and the settlement with Johnson & Johnson is over, which is $5 billion. That for the total package for everyone is over 9 years, with the potential of the Johnson & Johnson portion of the money to be monetized at present value. Of the funds going directly to states and counties, and other subdivisions. At least 85% of the money, from what I understand, has to be used for abatement and remediation of the opioid epidemic. And the distribution, or the settlement with the distributors, and I believe with J&J, has Exhibit E with a very long list of potential expenditures that would be authorized under the settlement agreement. The agreements also provide for injunctive relief so that there be changes to the way distributors and J&J conduct their business. And so this isn't a typical, what you would call a class action lawsuit. The county is a litigant party in this, and so we don't have any type of opt-out. The counties need to decide whether to accept this agreement or not. And all settlements have to be accomplished by January 2nd, 2022, which means for us, the December board meeting. After January 2nd, 2022, if there's insufficient participation, both parties have the option to walk away. And one thing that you should keep in mind is that 2.3 million for the county is the maximum. That requires almost all of the participating municipalities, counties, and the state to participate. Now, if a small municipality were to opt out, given the settlement formula, that probably wouldn't make much of a difference at all. But if the Milwaukee County or the city of Milwaukee dropped out, that would have a substantial impact on the proceeds that are available in the settlement to St. Croix County. So the goal is to get 100% participation, and the goal is to maximize the dollars. And why I think this is a good idea, it's been the product of litigation and literally years of settlement negotiations that we've been apprised of from the staff perspective, but it's taken a tremendous amount of work. The negotiators, the three law firms are putting this forward, and the attorney generals are putting this forward because we think this is the best deal right now. And so money is more important than, I guess, the risk of losing in the litigation. There have been some unfavorable opinions. As an example, the Oklahoma Supreme Court recently tossed the case against several defendants. So, and as we go on, it's potentially possible that some of these entities that we're settling with, there'll be insolvencies. So there's ample motive to settle now. And what happens if we don't settle? Included in your packet, and if you had an opportunity to read it, the judge who in Northern Ohio, who's been proceeding over all of these cases, has what I would call a dynamite package of incentives, meaning that if you don't settle and take this, you have to be prepared to try your case in 90 days, which would be very difficult. I mean, this is very, very complex litigation. So the judge is essentially saying to the participants, please settle or else you're going to have to get ready very, very quickly. Trying to incentivize 100% participation. So the deadline is January 2nd. Passing this resolution would authorize the county administrator to sign the MOUs with the local governments and the state, and the settlement agreements with the distributors and J&J. Does anyone have any questions over this very complex matter?
I guess my question would be, would there be any reason not to move forward?
I really can't think of any.
Just out of curiosity, the 2.3, you mentioned several time frames that the payments, or those involved would have to pay out. They have time frames. Does that impact our receipt of these funds if it all comes to fruition?
That does impact, so we won't get all the money at once. This is money that's going to flow, as I understand it, from the distributors over an 18-year period, and from Johnson & Johnson over a 9-year period. However, that could be monetized and reduced to present value, at least the money from J&J. I don't know about the money from the distributors, so we take a lesser value that's discounted and projecting what the interest rate on money would be, so we get something less, but it would be available now. But I guess we're not going to be able to solve this opioid problem in a year or 2 years. I think it's going to be a stream of money that's going to come to the county that will feed programs that are set up to abate and remediate the problem. So yes, the money's going to trickle in. It's not going to be in just one payment. But the payments the distributors have already deposited, as I understand it, money in an escrow account this September, and the initial deposits will be made next summer to be paid. So the county would be seeing money sometime in 2022.
I have kind of a real detailed question for you. I'm looking at the resolution. This is the paragraph that begins in line 39.
Okay.
And then on line 41, it basically says a settlement agreement will get the benefits provided St. Croix County, and then it goes into A, B, C, D. And it looked like A, B, C were things that were actionable items on St. Croix County, but D was not. D basically says that the Joint Committee on Finance have to approve the settlement agreement. So I wondered if that D needed to be a standalone item?
Well,
Or
they're going to have to. So once the counties approve A, B, C, then the legislators Joint Committee on Finance has to approve the terms of the settlement agreement and the AG MOU. And that's a separate act that we're not involved in. And because the legislature has already set up a process for that, I don't think there'll be a problem with that separate act. I'm not sure that I'm answering your question. But
since it's a separate act, it seemed like the way it was written that provided St. Croix County does the following, A, B, C, D, and D was not something that we were responsible for.
These also was a resolution not drafted by us. It was drafted by the settlement attorneys. So
right.
The format would be consistent with all the different municipalities that are approving it. So.
In that case, we shouldn't change it.
Yeah, the only thing that
That's okay, it's fine.
Really, the only thing I changed from the resolutions was putting specifically St. Croix County rather than the county, and putting the specific official that was approving the settlement agreement or signing the settlement agreement, which was Ken Witt, or the county administrator who's going to docu-sign all of these agreements once they're ready. You needed to know.
Never mind. Any other questions? If not, I think we're ready for a motion. Supervisor Ard?
I would move to approve the settlement agreement for St. Croix County to enter into the settlement agreement as stated within the resolution.
Second.
Supervisor Cook? Any further discussion? All right, given none, we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Scott, for reading that entire and analyzing it. Appreciate that.
Word in the hand, working in the bush.
I always say a good meeting is when I don't talk.
Okay, any requests for future agenda items? All right, seeing none, any announcements or correspondence? Okay, doesn't look like it. I'll mention before we adjourn, the date of our next meeting will be on Tuesday, December 21st. I believe that's correct. Okay, given that, we'll adjourn at 5:46. Thank you.